Hey everybody, welcome to Houdini Hangout. Tonight on the 18th of January. My name's Peter. I'm going to be kind of taking you through a little project that I've been working on and actually building it up from scratch this time, as opposed to just looking at some stuff that is already built. Yeah, I hope you enjoy your time here with us tonight, and yeah, just looking forward to hearing from anybody that might be watching. Looking to have this be a real open conversation. If you guys have any suggestions or questions, or anything that you do differently, I'd love to know. I don't purport to be any type of Houdini expert by any chance or by any means, but just happy to be learning and inviting you guys, I guess, along on the journey of me learning, and we can all hopefully get something out of a time like this where we can all kind of get together and learn Houdini. So yeah, so tonight I'm going to be working on some swirling snow. I'm basically looking to make some effects for a character for a project that I'm working on with my studio. And we're basically doing like a swirling snow around a character, basically, or a character made out of swirling snow, more or less. And so I was kind of tasked with that by our, one of our, kind of creative directors. And so I was kicking around the idea, and so basically I decided to go with a pyro sim, and doing that as kind of the basis for this. I'm going to eventually add some particles in and stuff, and hopefully we'll even start getting there tonight and just be playing around with some stuff. But my initial thing is to do this, kind of contained pyro sim. I don't want it blowing everywhere. I kind of want it to be contained around a character and be able to control that to some extent. So I'll kind of show you what I did with that, and I might even find, maybe even through the process of doing this again live, some better ways to do that. But yeah, that's the idea for tonight. And if you are, if you have any, questions, comments, anything like that, yeah, thanks for the follow. If you have any questions, comments, drop them in the chat. If you have any suggestions for how I'd do something better, or if you see me like, oh, that seems like that should have worked better, happy to hear from you guys. Yeah, so I'm gonna just jump right in. And so the kind of interesting thing this week is that my life has kind of been dominated by snow. I live in the Northeast, and so let's see here. This was my car outside. If you can't tell, I'm from Western New York, as I say car like a total weirdo. But so that's my car buried under about 1.5 feet of snow. So snow is kind of an appropriate thing to be working with tonight. So let's dive into Houdini. I'm not going to do anything with the character animation or anything like that. I'm not any type of character animator by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm just going to go with some basic geometry in Houdini, and that way, if you want to follow along or take some time after this to work through it, you're more than welcome to. But all right, so let's get started. Going to make a geo node. And going to use the test geometry here. I'm going to use the rubber toy. I believe his name is Flip. I'm not going to use the shader. Have no need for it. Just going to be using this as kind of a basic geometry to start off my my volume from. And since I'm pretty sure that Flip has these like weird kind of crossover areas inside of him, I'm just going to Boolean him just so that we can get a little bit cleaner, looking geometry and stuff from that. So I'm going to do a Boolean union here. Just drop that in. And then that should get rid of all of these, kind of crossed over geometries here. And then it's just a nice open hole there. So in this case, it's not a big deal here. I mean, he's got a couple little spikes on his head and things like that, but I noticed it helped a little bit, so I'll just do it anyways. And then the next thing to do is to do a VDB from polygons. and get a VDB that way out of this. And by default, this will give you a signed distance field. That's what you're seeing here. And what I want to do is actually get a density field, because I'm going to use this as a basis for my simulation. So I'm just going to turn that off, turn density on. And I'll leave the voxel size for right now. Well, maybe I'll up it a little bit, maybe like 0.05. You're not gonna really see a lot right now because it's pretty light density, and I'm gonna tweak that in a second. But I'm also gonna play around with this world space units. Gonna need to tweak that a little bit just to give myself a little bit more of exterior and interior voxels to work with. If you haven't done anything with VDBs or signed distance field, the idea is basically there are these voxels that are outside and inside of the surface, basically, and that is going to be I'm going to be using that a little bit later, actually. So on this one, I'm sorry, I don't need that on for this one, but for another VDB, I'm going to make it a little bit. I'll have to turn that one on, and we'll use that to help calculate kind of the strength of the attraction force that I'm going to be creating around this character. And so, I mean, there's certainly, I'm sure several ways to do this in Houdini. There's always a myriad of ways to do any particular task or setup or whatever, but this is just a way that I kind of had an idea with, and I'm going to probably keep working through it and tweaking it and finessing it, but I got it to a spot where I really kind of liked it. So anyways, so we have a density VDB here. Not a ton of voxels because the voxel size is fairly low. What do we have right now? 7,200. Yeah. So I'm also going to do a volume. I believe it's volume noise, if I'm not mistaken here. Yep. Volume noise fog. Drop that down. I hadn't used this one before, but I've used some, like, doing it through VDB or through a VOP before, through a volume VOP and adding noise into it, but I'm not even sure if they've done that inside of here. Yep, it looks like that is the case in here inside of it. If you dive into a node like this, you can see they have a volume VOP inside, but this is just nice. They wrap it all up in a nice kind of HDA for us, so they take some of the pain out of adding noise into a volume. So what I did was change this to minimum and maximum, and I'm going to want to do a multiply here because I'm going to want to break this up. I want some of the parts of this volume to stay at full density, my full input density, and then parts to get basically zero density. I want them to be multiplied by 0. Obviously, that'll cancel out any density that's in that specific voxel. The other thing I noticed is that I kind of want to boost this a little bit. That's going to give me a little bit better definition in the viewport, so I can kind of see a little bit better what it's doing, and then I don't have to boost that quite as much after the simulation has happened. I can kind of input that level into the simulation and start from there, and then I don't have to be jacking up the look and everything like that in my actual pyro simulation. So so I can add this into in here, and so I'm going to have this animating because I want this to change over time as the character is going through, as it's moving or flying around or doing whatever. We're actually thinking this is going to be some sort of a quadruped character, but I just chose this character, this little simple model, just because I knew it would be something that would be easily accessible for everyone. So yeah, so then I changed, let's see, the noise that I was using before was simplex. I had it on 0.3, and I turned, did I tweak anything else? I think that was it. Just have some notes here, sorry, excuse me, looking over here. So let me just turn this down even a little bit more, and we can start to see what's going on here. So this will obviously be, this, as we change the element size here, this is going to change the size of these holes that are kind of getting, eaten into this noise right here. So let me just double check that. Element size. Yep, I had 0.03. Oh, that's what I did. I also remapped this a little bit. So what I did was I opened up this remap here just to kind of give it almost like a little bit more contrast in these different kind of areas of the from 0 to 1, or in this case from 0 to 10. So what I did was I just took this here, and this is gonna obviously gonna change the values. This side is 0, this side's 1, and then this is kind of remapping those values as we go across. So I'm going to change these both to B-spline and add in a couple of, kind of control points here. And this is going to just help kind of shape this a little bit. Kind of tweak it as needed. And that's starting to look a little bit more like how I had it. And then I can actually eat away at certain elements of this, to make it either, have bigger holes or, whatever. So that's getting pretty good. We're getting a little bit more breakup in there. And really the reason I'm doing this is because, the better your input volumes are into your simulation, the better that your simulation is going to look overall. You want some randomness in there. You want some, stuff happening in there that's a little bit, that just adds some variation to allow the simulation to then, push it in a more natural way rather than just this big block of density coming in. So that's our volume noise fog right there. I can kind of tweak that as needed once I get in a little further to this. But yeah, so the good thing is that I'm pretty much ready to just drop that in to a Pyro node. So I'm gonna go Pyro Solver right here, and if you haven't used this Pyro Solver before, super nice. They've really simplified some of these things that you have to do in order to kind of set up your own Pyro simulation, especially if you're not using just default shelf tools and things like that up here. You go into your PyroFX and you can get all these things here. But if you're not doing that, this is a really nice new node. You don't have to set up any DOP networks or anything like that. They have all of those things set up in the SOPs level here. In fact, what I'm going to do real quick is I'm just going to call this sim snow effect, just so we've got some nice naming here. I always make my sim nodes purple. I learned that in a tutorial or something at some point, and I just kind of kept my color scheme from that. So maybe we'll all do that soon. I don't know. But yeah, anyways, if you guys have any questions or any comments, or you're like, hey, this is you're off base on that or whatever, please drop them into chat. I'd love to hear from any of you guys. Obviously not trying to put myself out there as any kind of, expert on this, but happy to hear from you all and, just know what everybody out there is doing. So anyways, yeah, so Pyro Solver. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to link my voxel size here into my VDB from polygons. And I'm going to call this create density, because we're going to have a few different VDB from polygons. Oh, it's yelling at me. I have my autosave turned on just for instances like this where I'm like getting too far in and it's like, hey, you got to save. So I'm going to save my scene real quick here. So I'm going to put this under into my Houdini Hangout thing here. And I'm going to call this snow effect. Just give it a V1. Great. All right, now we're all set. So I'm going to right click and copy this, and I'm going to go up to my create density node here. Let me just make this a little bigger just in case you can't see that. And I'm going to right click, paste relative references right here. So now that's being driven by the Pyro Solver 1 division size, and 2 dots at the beginning of your any of your expressions. Just like this, like a channel expression, just means to go up a level, and then find Pyro Solver 1 and go inside and find the division size. And that is what we've got going on here. So let's do this at 0.2 like that. Great. So now we've got our Pyro sim coming, or our density coming into our Pyro Solver. I'm just going to actually do a quick thing here and just initialize the smoke. Believe that's what I'm going to want to do. I think that's what I did last time. Yep. The only thing here I'm not going to be using is temperature. Not bringing that in. But That'll bring that in like that. I'm going to change this just to be a more white color. So I'm going into my look tab here and just setting this back a little bit here to make it a little more white. And I believe I had my shadow density down as well, just so it felt a little bit more like snow, so we could kind of evaluate this a little better without it looking too, dense and dark. This whole look tab is kind of just a little part of what they have in the new Pyro Bake volume. No, but it's the same sort of controls in here, so it works out pretty nice. I was putting a bake volume down after this to kind of lock in my look of my simulation, but then I had to keep jumping back and forth, so it's easier just to do it this way. And I can boost the density maybe just a little bit, just to to multiply it by 2 in here, just to see a little bit better what's going on. Great. So let me just make sure I've got everything good there. Yep. All right. So let's just take a look at this real quick too, because since I have this animation turned on here, as I go through here, you're going to see that this volume is going to change, over time. So as I play this, let me just turn that on so we're locked down to... so there you can see, obviously, we were getting all this, all these different like little elements evolving in there and stuff like that. That's obviously really helpful for, like I said, driving that randomness and making sure that you're getting some interesting, details in your sim from the start. Because if we take that out, if we take that, that noise out of here, let's see if I turn that, no, I guess I can't really do that in here because I guess I could just do, no, it's always going to be putting noise in here. I was going to try to turn it off, but anyways, if you don't have that, it's just going to be a big blob basically. So it's not really going to have any interesting details, and I didn't want it to be completely static either. So this will kind of help. It gets a little trickier when this character will be moving around and stuff like that, because obviously you don't want your noise fields to be moving around, without, outside of the character being locked to the world space, and then your character's moving around and that noise, it's like walking through it. So there's some stuff you have to do there just to make sure that doesn't happen and things like that. But for right now, I'm just doing this as a stationary effect just to kind of see what is happening with this character as it's, evolving. So, all right. So back to the pyro solver. I'm at the end of my timeline there. Sorry. Don't want it to simulate the whole thing. As you can see, not a whole lot of interesting stuff is happening here because I don't really have any velocity or anything in there. So what I'm going to do next is make sure I'm sourcing some things. I'm going to source some velocity in after this, but for right now, we'll leave that as it is. We don't need to change the bounding of it. That all looks good. Collisions, we're not going to have any collisions, so that's fine. I could actually probably turn that off. That might save me some solution time. Fields, I always like to have the speed field in my calculation, just if I need to add in, if I need to add in some disturbance or things like that. That usually is really nice to have, have that driven with your speed of your volume as it's moving through your sim. Kind of breaks up that leading edge a lot. So, yeah. So I'm going to want this to dissipate, but first I think I'm just going to add in a little bit of turbulence in here. Also not going to need the buoyancy because I don't really want it to go up really at all. So as I add in the turbulence and scale that up just a little bit here, we should start getting this pushing things around a little bit here. Oh, right. So, by default, the threshold field on this turbulence is temperature, and I don't have any temperature in here. I don't really need it to be driving anything right now. It's not really doing anything in my simulation. If there's something I'm missing with that, I mean, please let me know. But I don't think there's anything inherently that I'm missing with having a no temperature in my sim. But anyways, so that's one of the problems there. So we need to change. That's why we weren't seeing any turbulence happening here. So we need to change that. And then let me see what I had that set as here. Okay. So what I had is instead of the threshold range being 0.1 to 0, I set this to 0 and 1. Now this is going to remap just like we were doing before. It's going to remap the intensity from 0 to 1. And I think technically I don't need that control field on. I don't think I have it on right now. I don't think it really is making any difference because it's doing exactly the same thing as what it's doing up above. But basically I'm just setting these two to be about the same. And I believe now when we do that, yep, we'll start to get that pushing stuff around in here. So I don't want the turbulence to be that high. About a quarter of that will be good. And so this is just going to start adding turbulence into my simulation and start to push it around and do some stuff with it. I want it to be a pretty smooth simulation. I don't want it to be too like rough and coarse looking because I kind of want it to be like swirling around the character. Obviously, this is just kind of going everywhere right now, and it's a little crazy. But what I'm thinking is I need to just adjust a couple more parameters here to get us back into a little bit of a better space. So also you can see down here I've got quite a few voxels going, so I might turn that down a little bit just to make sure I'm not going too crazy. Let's just up that a little bit. Should sim a little faster. Your mileage may vary on this. I have a decent computer at my house, luckily. Just happened to get it pre-pandemic and really lucked out on a nice Threadripper setup and everything. But yeah, your mileage may vary with doing different sims. If you're running into some issues with doing it on your CPU and you want to try your GPU, you change that right here over to dense and use OpenCL, and then it'll actually start initializing that on your GPU and going through stuff, going through all this. So it's basically putting all that data onto the GPU right now, building a dense grid around that entire boundary that you can see right there, and now starting to solve it. And unfortunately, it's probably going to be a bit for my GPU as well. So I find that the sparse on the CPU works just fine. But if you are looking to do any simulation like this, you switch it over like that in this new setup. So anyways, getting fine speeds here, so I'm not going to complain too much. 6 frames a second is fine. If you ever have any questions about setups or anything like that, I love putting computers together. I've built several for our office, and I just really like setting up computers. So if you have any computer questions, happy to give you any recommendations with that as well here. So anyways, yeah, so we've got this pyro solver started here. We've got some shape going on here. I did turn the swirl size down a little bit. As you can see, these puffs are kind of gigantic. Don't really want that. So I'm going to set this down to about half of what it was before, and that should start getting us into this little bit more, isolated swirls that are more around. Hey, cool. Thanks for being here. I think Moo Moo is your screen name there. Thanks for being with us tonight. Yeah, so we're getting these more isolated curls in our noise now, and that's good. But obviously, this is getting pushed around way too much. Like, I wouldn't want my, you can't even see what the initial shape is for this. It's starting to become just a blob of pyro nonsense now. So it's obviously a little bit too much there. So what eventually we're going to do is actually put in a system to help kind of corral those excess velocities and start pushing them back in towards the model, so that we aren't having these just random noise things pushing it around everywhere. So yeah, so that's pretty much what I set up for that part of it. Now I did also add in a little bit of viscosity into my simulation. I was doing that with, if you go back and look at a previous stream that I did, there was a cup of coffee. You'll see it later in the stream when it's time for a little coffee break. I was playing around with that, and also previously playing around with a hot chocolate thing at work, and realizing that the viscosity really helps with that a lot. Helps keep any of these fluid type simulations, and yes, smoke and volumes are fluid, helps keep those kind of more contained into a single unit, so it doesn't let it kind of push around quite as much and get these little tiny details all over the place. So I think I put only a little bit in there. Yeah, it's a really small amount. I have like 0.025. It might be too little to even make a difference, but I felt like I was noticing a little bit of a difference there. Just felt like it was holding everything together a little bit better. And let's see if I crank this, you'll start to notice that it's definitely, yeah, you can see there, it's really like this weird, like amorphous, like amoeba thing going on now. And that's really not that much viscosity. If I turn it off again, just so you can see it, I mean, we just start to get a lot more wispy kind of things pushing really far away from it. And really that's obviously not what I was going for in this simulation. So, just 0.5, 0.25, something in that range got me kind of where I wanted, and was feeling a little bit more, these contained swirls rather than just pushing, anywhere. So, we can kind of keep playing around with that as needed. This might give me a little bit better look anyways. So maybe it's something like that. I think anything that's like a match or something that's like you extinguished a flame as well. I think that's a classic thing that I've seen out there as a real good use for this viscosity attribute in a smoke sim or anything like that. So I don't know if anybody else has any other thoughts of like, hey, this is what I've used viscosity for in a smoke simulation. But usually you think of that going with fluid just because it's kind of it's just kind of a no-brainer. It makes sense. Viscosity is something that's often talked about with like liquids and things like that, and honey or whatever different things you might be looking at. But so that's something that helped a little bit as well. Helped just kind of keep those swirls from just pushing away really crazy. So I think I'll just leave this back at 0.5. It worked out fine before. So now the other thing that I decided to do with this simulation was to do something that I had learned actually from Intagma. If you haven't used their tutorials before, go there as soon as this is done, I guess. I mean, they are awesome. I'll put their link. Let me pull up their link real quick, and I'll drop that in chat. But they are they're awesome guys. I don't know them personally, but they're super knowledgeable on all this stuff. I know that they've both been doing this stuff for a while now, and it's a great place to learn some cool new stuff. Here, I'll drop that into chat for you guys. But they're awesome guys, and have some cool accents, and I believe they're from Germany, and that was kind of where I just trial by fire learned a lot of Houdini stuff from them. And it was actually because I was learning some Cinema 4D stuff from, I think it was, I think his first name's Manuel. Manuel. Sorry. I think Moritz is the one that does most of their streams now, but he was doing some stuff for cinema and ended up starting to work in Houdini, and I was like right around the same time that I was kind of finding out about it. So so I learned about this like little trick from those guys. So check out their tutorials. They're awesome. But this is using calculating a gradient, and basically the idea is you want to try to figure out from basically what direction around your object, create a velocity field almost in a way, a vector field around your object that's pointing in the normal direction away from or towards the geometry. So you could do something like taking your normals from your geometry and have that go out into the have that extrapolate out and things like that. But using a signed distance field with a gradient calculation works really well, and it's super easy to set up. So I will do that next, and we'll use that to start driving these volumes around so that this isn't pushing away quite so much. So the first thing you do is use another VDB from polygons. And we'll start it right up at the same point here. And this one we are going to use in this surface mode. And I am going to turn this on because this will be helpful for me to be able to kind of figure out how far I want the voxels to go away, to kind of be, there's this exterior band voxels here that it's referencing right here. Basically what that's saying is outside of the surface of this, how many voxels do you want to put on the outside? And that's going to be carrying that distance information. That's where you get the SDF, sign distance field. And so you see here also there's an unsigned distance field. And the reason for that is because outside of it, I believe, is positive, and inside of it's negative, I believe, is how that works, or vice versa. I could be wrong. You can always tell me if I'm wrong on that. I can't remember, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. And an unsigned distance field just has, I believe, sets it both to positive, and doesn't use sign, and just tells you how far you are from that surface. So there's reasons I'm sure you would want to use an unsigned distance field in certain cases, but for me, I really just want to be using the values that are on the outside of the object. So anyways, so this is going to create, you see this view right here. But really what this is visualizing is the surface at which those float values, basically hit 0, and that's the surface. And so that's what gets calculated there. So, let me just change this over here to use the same voxel size. In fact, I could actually just go over here and copy this, because that's the same expression. Just like that. And there we go. There's our sign distance field. And you can see, obviously, there's, it's getting a decent amount of the details in there and stuff. Working pretty good. And so that's just the straight up sign distance field. And I'll just do this, create SDF. But now we need to calculate that gradient value. And that's going to be, it's actually really simple in this case, because they actually have a VDB node for that now. I think when I was first messing with this, he showed it to us. One of the guys from Intagma showed it like all the way through. I believe it was just through a volume VOP. And so you had to do all the math and stuff like that. And now it's just a thing in here. So I believe it's VDB analysis. Yep, if I'm remembering correctly. And so we just basically use this node here, and this is going to be calculating the gradient, and it's actually set to that right from the start. And so you can see here, it's talking about some of those things that I was mentioning here. You're taking a scalar value and calculating a vector value from that scalar, how that scalar is changing. I was actually explaining this to my wife today a little bit, because she's a graphic designer and she understands, the concepts of gradients for graphic designers a little different. But I kind of was explaining to her, it's almost a similar thing that you're calculating. You're kind of calculating which direction this number is going from 0 to 1, or how it's changing over time, and that kind of pointing that direction, that shows you that it's going away from the surface in that direction. So similar to how you might have a black and white gradient here, you're kind of calculating this 3-dimensional gradient around the object. So it's kind of, you can kind of think of it that way in some ways, or at least I do. Maybe that's totally off base, but it was super helpful for me to kind of learn this whole thing. So anyways, gradient, I changed the name, I believe. Yeah, that's what I did. I just appended the operation name. So basically what this is doing is bringing in the surface here. You can see right here, we've got a surface attribute, and then I'm changing that over here and setting it to be surface gradient. And yeah, just if you haven't ever done this before for some reason, you can middle click and get this information quickly, and it'll go away when you're done middle clicking, or you can hover over this eye and it'll bring it up, and you can pin it and do all that kind of stuff. So anyways, so that's what's happening in the VDB analysis node. We have that gradient calculated here, and I actually want to merge. I'm going to end up merging these two together. So I'm holding shift down while I do this. Then if you hit alt, it drops down a merge node. So now in this node, we have a surface and the surface gradient all in the same place. And you can see right there, there's a float and a vector 3. Yeah, so they're matching in that sense. They just have a different type of value that they're holding. One's a float, one's a vector, three floats. So anyways, so we've got this merge node here. So we got create FDS, excuse me. And then this is, I'm just going to do calculate gradient. Just like that. Cool. So yeah, if anybody, again, I hate to be a broken record, but if you're just joining us or whatever, please drop in the chat if you got any comments or questions, or you think I did something stupid or whatever. I'd love to hear from everybody. This really isn't about me like showing you something. It's really trying to be more of a place where people can come and interact and hang out, learn things, and hopefully we could create some sort of community around that. Since I know there's a lot of people out there that are either learning Houdini or maybe are new to it or have been doing this for years. I've been doing it for about 5 years now, so just always always something new to learn in Houdini, and new nodes, new key commands, things like that. You're never going to get ahead, so you just keep learning. Anyways, so there's merge node for that. And so what I'm going to actually do here is, since I don't want these vectors to be calculated at this, like have them all be the same amplitude all the way towards the surface. I kind of want them to slowly taper off, so that if something goes far away from this pyro sim, it'll get kind of slowed down, pushed harder until it comes back, and then it will have a small velocity there that it's trying to add in. And when that's the case, it'll hopefully allow it to have a little bit more activity right around the actual pyro sim that's happening here. Because we don't want to get rid of all of this swirling, nice motion that we've got here. We want to keep that. We don't want to just be pushing it back down and just kind of stamping it out. But we want to give it that room around it there to be able to kind of have some little parts that come out and then get pushed back in, because we don't want it to be completely locked down. So what I want to do is use my SDF field that I created and basically multiply that against this gradient, and that's going to give me the ability to kind of like adjust those values based on how far they are away, so that as we get closer or farther, they'll either get smaller or larger. So what I'm going to do is actually use a volume VOP for that, and that is going to be a pretty simple set of calculations here. So I'll just drop down a volume VOP type, and we'll drop it down there, and we'll dive inside. So I'm actually not going to need any of this because this is just all density stuff. So see ya. And I'll do a bind node. Bind is just bringing in that attribute, and I want to bring in the surface. When you're in a volume VOP like this, you can just write down the name of the VDB that you want to pull in, and it'll pull it right in. Or if you have a standard volume in Houdini, it'll pull the name of it in as well. So surface is a float, and that should be fine. And then we also want to do another bind, and this will be surface gradient. And that will actually be of a different type. That'll be a vector. And there is a slight difference there. If you can see it, there's a little bit of color difference. That one's like a dark green. That's like a light green. So, so then what we're going to do is just multiply those against each other. So let's drop that there and that there. So now we're just multiplying our vector by this surface node here, or by this surface volume, excuse me. And then let's just export this. So we'll do a bind export, and then drop this into here. And let's just set this to V, because this is going to be our velocity. We could actually, now that I'm thinking of it, type down the global. Nope, I guess it's output, isn't it? Yeah, I think that's it. Nope. I deleted those things before, and I actually should have kept them. There it is. So I could actually just have done this and dropped that into the velocity part right there, and that's fine. Because before actually I'd calculated it and I was gonna do some other stuff with it, but now that I'm thinking through this on the fly, I'm like, wait a second, I could have just named it V. I didn't have to rename it after the fact. And then I would actually keep my other volumes intact. So anyways, so let's just let's call this calculate val, or let's just call it V since that's the name of the volume. So now we should have, oh, right. I can't do that actually. My bad, because there is no volume already set. This node won't actually write out a velocity or a new VDB. It'll only modify them that are there. So that's why I did it that way. So again, back to bind export. Get to see all my mistakes. Maybe even learn something from them. Hopefully I will. All right, vector. And this is going to be the surface gradient. Did have an underscore in there. That's a vector. Great. So that should be good. Okay, so that should be setting up our surface gradient there. And I actually use a nice little package of HDAs that was created by, I believe it was one of the guys from at the company Man vs. Machine. I believe it's one of their like senior guys created this. He does a bunch of stuff under the term AE Lib. Really good stuff they have. So I actually had it. They have a vector volume visualization here, so you can get some little lines out of that and stuff like that. So if I put in the surface gradient as our velocity field, you can see what's happening here. And lo and behold, we do have some velocity inside of our geometry here. And we actually don't want that. So what I want to do is actually clamp those values down. I don't want them to be going over, I don't want them to be going into the negative and trying to push back out. I don't really want to be encouraging the volume to push out anymore. As you could see, it was pushing out, quite a bit. But I want to just let it kind of have its natural, the natural turbulence push it out and not really be influencing it in any other way. So it's pretty simple to fix that. And we just go back into this volume fop here, and I'm going to do a fit range here. Now I'm using this instead of something like a clamp. You could type down clamp as well and drop that in there. But I kind of want to be able to remap it if I need to. Down the line, I might want to be, adding in some values or doing something different with it. So I'm just going to use a fit for now. I do know that the clamp exists in there, but this worked out pretty well. And you can see now, just putting that in there and keeping that other node highlighted, all of the vectors inside are gone now because it's clamped out these values from the minimum of 0 to the maximum of 1. So that basically means from the surface all the way out to, the destination, 1 meter, I guess in this case. Now that I'm thinking of it, it might be in meters. Yeah. Yeah, I guess so. Interesting. I hadn't thought of that before, but if that's actually like exactly, I don't know if anybody knows if that goes directly to the distance or not, if you're doing an SDF, like if that's directly correlates to that. Not sure off the top of my head. It probably does. I don't know what else it would correlate to, but I'm guessing that it does. And so actually in that case, let's just adjust this a little bit. Let's give ourselves a little bit more band voxels here. So let's push that a little bit further. Let me see what I had previously, just so I'm making sure that I'm not. Yep, that should be good. And then don't really need as much interior. I could just do 0.1 or something like that. It's really not going to change anything. So So this, because it's in world space units, is actually a 0.5 meter of exterior band voxels, and that's going to add some voxels to it, I'm sure. But it's, it's not a super high, resolution VDB or anything like that. So I don't really have to worry too much. I mean, we've got, at this point, we've got, 300,000 voxels. That's actually pretty low. So anyways, there is our velocity field visualized right now. It is still technically the surface gradient that we're using for the velocity volume, but because it's a vector 3 field, we can actually still visualize it just basically the same. So that is that's kind of the base part of that, and really the last step in it is putting down a name. I don't need to put that there. So putting down a name node and changing the attribute. It's a primitive, so I'm just going to take this off and add the number of renames. And let me just pull up my geometry spreadsheet real quick here. And we can see that we have surface and surface gradient, and I just want it to be surface gradient and change that to V. And there we go. So we have surface and V. Because if we come back over to this pyro solver here, let me go back into my scene view. If we go into our sourcing here, this is looking for the source volume of V, and it'll put that into the target field of velocity, or vel. I believe the reason for this difference in kind of nomenclature between the V and the vel and changing that is because traditionally in SOPs level, the V attribute is your point attribute for how the velocity of an object is moving, or whatever. And in the DOPS context, or in your dynamics, they used vel, and I think that just helped at that point. Now that this is kind of that we're doing the sourcing from point velocities a lot more and different things like that, the workflow has changed a little bit recently. And so I believe that's really why we're doing that rename here. It's kind of a little bit, I think maybe a holdover, might not be, but kind of what it seems like. So anyways, so I'm just going to name it V. So that's the same there. And then I'm also going to just put down a quick blast node and just go up here. They changed this recently too, so we can actually see some of the attributes, like in this case, name, and we can just say just the V, delete non-selected, and then I'll keep just our velocity field, and we can see it still should be there. Nope, because now we're visualizing the surface gradient, so I need to change that to V, and there it is. And the one kind of neat thing about this is you could really visualize a pretty dense field here if you wanted to, or you could do it really simple and just have a couple velocities that are being sourced there. That's in a grid method. You can also, I believe, scatter on a surface, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, what is scatter? Yeah, scatter goes onto the surface of a geometry, I believe. So in that case, it might be using the surface. Interesting. Maybe just into the velocity. It's just into the velocity volume itself. It's scattering points, so scattering them in volume instead of just having it as a grid. But the grid is pretty helpful here because we now know that there are no velocity vectors inside of it. It is hollow in here, as you can see. So there's nothing in there. Hopefully that comes through okay with all the compression and everything on a stream. But yeah, so we've got our velocity field here that we're going to start messing with. And so what I'm going to do is take these two sides of this network, the density here, click on that, shift click here, alt click to put a merge down, and drop that into the pyro solver. And so now if we do this and let it start going, I think we're still running into more or less the same issue there. And that is because I had the velocity field set a little bit differently, I believe. Let me just double check, make sure I'm not doing this. Yep, that's correct there. Got the velocity field coming in. All right, so what I had before here would have been, let me just make sure. Density in V. All right, so the pyro sourcing, instead of doing it as just a standard add, what I actually ended up doing was using the pull setting. And what this does, if we are to pull up the help here real quick, just to kind of get it right from the horse's mouth here. I believe if I actually need to look at this one, so I'll look up the volume source because it's actually using the volume source node node under the hood. So if I do that, that should give me all of these here. And so pull, basically what that does is what they say here is the values in the target field are pushed towards the corresponding entries in the source volume, which basically means that based on how you set these strengths in here, it's going to be taking those velocities from your source field and trying to kind of pull the velocity that's getting created back more or less from the actual simulation. So instead of just adding the velocity in and just kind of continuing to push it in, that'll actually help pull it back towards slowly. And what I did was I set the acceleration strength to 10 and 10. And I also turned on the directional strength as well. That's basically just helping to turn. I believe it's, instead of doing each individual component of a vector separately, it is basically changing the amplitude overall and the direction of that vector and trying to pull that back without like kind of doing these intermediate steps. I think that was the best that I could understand from it. If anybody knows a better way to explain that, I'm happy to hear it. But so that was what I was doing there. Let's see how that looks now. There we go. I think, oh no, it's yeah, it's kind of doing it. Okay, so I think we're starting to get there. Slowly but surely. So now that should be keeping those volumes a little bit more at bay and keeping them closer to the actual model here. Let me just see if I just want to make sure I'm not missing something here. I could very well be missing something in my SDF or in the gradient surface. No, that seems right. Let me see. What could I be doing wrong here? Because I'll show you what this should end up looking like, because I actually have it over here. Huh, there it is right there. And I've even done a couple extra things with it here, but let me just disconnect this. There we go. So this is actually what this will start to look like once I figure out what I missed here. But so basically it keeps it closer to the actual surface and doesn't really let it move away, but still has that swirling effect going on inside of it. So let me just play this back and you can kind of see it. So that's the look I'm going for. And for whatever reason, it's giving me a little trouble right now. So let me keep playing with this for a second. Yeah, like I said before, I do not claim to be some sort of guru at this. I've only been doing it for, like I said, about 5 years now. Hasn't been like crazy amount of time, but yeah, yeah, just trying to learn and you know, get the conversation rolling more or less. I thought this would be a good place to get people's conversation, get a conversation going, and be able to kind of learn back and forth. Um, Sometimes a Discord channel is a little bit too impersonal, and you know, it's just kind of a little bit of, you can get lost in the noise there. So figured having a moderated place to talk could be cool. So anyways, let's work through this. Let me just double check everything here. So we're creating a surface, VDB, exterior and interior bands. What I actually noticed in my network was I actually had put this on a different part of my node chain. So let me just see if that was what the problem was. Maybe it added that in later. Oh, another thing I'm just thinking about what it might be is that I had some settings changed slightly differently in this other one, and I think that could be it. I believe I had some advection set up. Let me see if that does it. We might be getting there. We might be getting there. I'm going to up the cache just a little bit so it doesn't run out of cache on me here. Oh, my dissipation was also higher. Sorry. So what might have been happening here that was causing those things to kind of fly away a little bit more was that it wasn't dissipating quite as quickly. I didn't want it to stick around forever. So let's see if that'll help. Yeah, that looks like that's actually doing some of it. So my shape as well. Let me just double check that. Right. And now I actually think if I put this back in, we'll be okay. So I'm guessing that that had something to do with that advection reflection step and with the dissipation. That's what I'm guessing here. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm guessing that in that advection reflection step, there must be a calculation that's happening that like injects that velocity in at a different stage of the of the whole calculation. So yep, now we're getting somewhere. Excuse my plosive there. All right, let's up the voxel size just a little bit so we can maybe see a little bit more detail in this. Kind of keep playing with this here. I want to make a little bit more holes on this. So I'm thinking that if I come back up here, pull this back a little bit, it's actually going to help me with that. I just want to make this not such a like a huge dense thing. I kind of want it to have some more variation to it. And that might help as well to create the look I'm going for. Yeah, there we go. Now we're getting there. So the thing that you can do, let me jump back here. Sometimes I'm used to jumping into the Pyro network to go like into the, like thinking I'm going into it like a dynamics node, not thinking that, oh yeah, I can get to everything right here. So please pardon my my double click happiness there, but what you can see in this when you jump in here is there's actually places to put different force outputs, source output, advection output. So these are places where you can put your own microsolvers and things like that. This is really well explains it. I'm not going to go into any more detail than that already goes into. Thank you, side effects guys, for putting this in here, and gals, sorry. But that that's super helpful and can show you like what to do as far as like what goes in which port and kind of how they all get calculated and stuff. But that's a way to kind of add your own little flair on top of it. So anyways, so what I can do to either kind of restrict this or increase this, is adjust these strengths right here. So if I set these all to, let's just say 5, that's going to change how quickly it accelerates back to its, to its, trying to, how quickly it accelerates towards pushing it in. And so that's going to obviously let it go a little bit further out, kind of push a little bit further away from the actual object itself. So this is going to be a bit more wispy, allow it to move a little bit more. If we go down to say 1, it's probably going to look almost the same as it did before. It's going to have almost no part that's pulling it back in. Yeah, it's a little different than before because now we have the dissipation going that's allowing these lighter areas to kind of blend out, but or kind of like, as it says, dissipate out or kind of just fade out as they get lighter and lighter. So you can kind of tweak these values here to kind of constrain it more or less. So this will actually keep it so that it's like locked into that shape. It's not going to really change almost at all. So really right now it almost doesn't even look like much of a simulation. So it's kind of just randomly pushing around and doing some weird little stuff. So maybe for right now we'll just leave it at 5. I think I did end up wanting to push it a little bit further when I got into the next stage of this, but there we go. Let's compromise 7.5. Cool. So that's kind of the first stage of that. If anybody has any like questions or thoughts about that, or like, hey, this would work way better for that, drop them in chat. Really love to hear whatever you guys are thinking with how this kind of looks or works. But yeah, so that's kind of the idea, the simplest idea here that's going on. Like that's kind of the base of the effect that I wanted to do. I wanted to have this kind of swirly, snowy kind of feel to it. The other thing that you can do obviously here, since this is really mostly getting driven by this turbulence, you can go in here and drive some of these things. So if I wanted the swirls to be, let's say, half of that size, now we're going to have a lot of littler swirls going around in there, and that's just going to give it a totally different feel, different look. And if we wanted to, again, push this higher, push the turbulence value higher, that's going to try to push it away from the actual volume itself and kind of create more of a, these little wisps that are kind of pushing away from it. So, I mean, these are ways you can dial this look in and art direct this. That's kind of always the beauty of Houdini, is the art directability of it. It's what really drew me to it. So you can really just have somebody come out, like, today I had my my creative director come back and forth with me a couple times and like, hey, what if we did this with it? What if we did that with it? And it's like, oh yeah, we could really do all of that. There's really no limitations in Houdini. You're the limitation to Houdini. So, that's kind of, just the cool thing about the software in general. So huge props to Houdini, to side effects. Love it. I wish I literally could only work in Houdini 24 hours a day. But alas, sometimes we have to open other programs. Maybe someday they'll fix that. Maybe someday we'll all just work in Houdini all the time. Anyways, I'm not getting paid to say that either. I'm not a sponsored plug there. So, anyways, so the last thing that I wanted to kind of do with this was, one of the things that my creative director said was, hey, could we, like, I love the way that this looks and kind of helps keep some of these details and things like that. And since this is a character, we want to have certain parts of it that are detailed and certain parts of it maybe that are more chaotic and don't need to have as close of detail. Like, it's going to be a quadruped. So like its legs maybe, or its the back half of its body might not need to be as defined as the head or the face, or if we have some sort of eyes that you can kind of see, or ears or whatever might need to be more or less defined. So how, could we do that with this and keep it more, controlled that way? And I was like, yeah, I don't see why not. So what I determined was that we could sort of use the same concept here that we did before with creating this SDF and having that actually multiply against this gradient. And what we could do is do almost the same thing, but instead of starting from this SDF geometry, or starting from the same test geometry here, could just create some simple any geometry at all. And so what I did was I just decided to drop down a sphere and do this same create SDF here. And so now in this case, it is actually taking, this is a primitive sphere, and that's obviously, being calculated and is a, perfect spherical object, and that's being calculated. And then the SDF node, you see this little angry sign here. It's saying the geometry's been converted to quads and triangles. So instead of letting Houdini just arbitrarily do that and create these like facets, I just decided to go in here and do a polygon, and then just, you can kind of adjust that as needed. Like, I don't know, maybe that's better. I don't know. Maybe it's not really that much better, but you can kind of then tease out, like that. You can make it a more smooth object if you need it, or less, or whatever. Let's do 8. Sounds good. Looks a little bit like a golf ball at this point, but whatever. So what I'm going to do is use this volume to kind of be a mask, more or less, to that velocity field that's going on there. And I will take this here. Let's template this and look at our sphere there. And so what I want to do is basically just put this, grab the wrong handle there. I just want to put this kind of at his backside, more or less here, maybe down a little bit as well, like something like that, right? Just so it's keeping maybe his head and maybe a little bit of his neck, like that. I'm going to extend these a little bit as well, just to make sure we're not, getting his little arms creating. I'm holding shift down as I do that, and it helps me drag both of those sides of this object. And then I'm just going to drag out another sphere here and shift, merge those together by doing Alt. If you're ever wondering if I hit something or did something that you're like, hey, what is that? Just, you can yell at me in the chat if I forgot to mention what key command or whatever I just did. So this sphere, I'm just going to adjust and set these back. Control middle click should set things back to default. I just want it to be a sphere. I'm going to scale it down. I'm going to view this merge here, go back and template that. And I'm going to move this back here just to kind of kill the little area back there of his tail, which is going to create some velocities. So this is creating an SDF. I'm going to call this mask because we kind of want to mask out the areas of that velocity field that we're injecting in there. And that should more or less be good, I believe. Let me see here what I've got in my previous thing that I had done. Yep, that's all I did. We'll see if I need to, I might have to add some more geometry, but it looks kind of funny like that. Big sphere with just the rubber toy, or the, little rubber toy head sticking out of there. But anyway, so I'm going to be able to use that in this calculate velocity step. So let me just adjust my setup here a little bit. Yeah, hope everybody's doing well tonight. Hope everybody's enjoying some random Houdini stuff. Like I said, I've been thinking a lot about snow this week, and this just happens to be where I'm at right now. I just had to shovel for hour and a half last night, maybe 2 hours. It was a pain. Anyways, so now we've got this calculate velocity here. We're putting this into the second input, and that's going to allow us to be able to do some calculations here, basically. So here's our fit node that we had from before. So let's just bring those globals back in at this point, because I will end up needing them. So why I deleted them before, anybody's guess, yours included. But, you know, sometimes you just feel like doing stuff. All right, so I'm going to use this to just sample, I believe. Yep, volume sample. So the reason I have to do this instead is because if I wanted to get this in here and use it like that, I could do it into this merge node, I guess, and, you know, have it go through this workflow the same way basically, and then, you know, come down here and do all this stuff. I mean, it's another way that I could do it, I guess. I just didn't want to add anything more really into this stream and going into the first part of this node, because then it's going to come out down here, and it just felt unnecessary to have it coming into that main part. And so I put this just into the second input so that I could just sample it in like this. So pretty much all I'm doing here is just telling it I'm looking for the op input 2, which goes into this part of the volume sample file. I believe you can also just set this second input, but this is just kind of something I've gotten used to doing, so I just leave it, whatever, works the way it is. And then sample position. Hey, great. Greyhound, thanks for the follow. For the sample position, I put this into P because we want to sample the position in the original volumes that are coming in and sample those through, get the SDF value from this node right here. So this will output the value at each individual voxel position, which really is kind of incredible when you think about that it's doing that it can do it as fast as it does. But I'm not a software developer. I don't understand how that all works, but it seems crazy to me because I feel like this stuff would be insanely slow in other software. So I don't know what Black Magic they're doing. Black Magic, that's another company. What kind of crazy spells they put in here to do this kind of stuff, but I guess it's just math. Anyway, so we're going to take this volume sample file right here, put this into this multiply node, and basically that'll multiply again where it's 0. It'll cancel out that volume, and where it's 1, it'll keep that part of the volume. So what I want to do here is actually I can just put a clamp on this. I can type. Man, I am struggling with that typing right now. It is 9 o'clock Eastern, so it's getting a little later. So maybe just tired a little, but. All right, so that's going to clamp the values there. We don't want it to go negative like an SDF would normally. So, and we don't want it to go positive inside because then we have no way of differentiating. So we'll put that clamp down. That should do it. Let's take a look at this vector visualization. And it sure is doing it. But as you can see here, because the velocity field is so far, outside of it or whatever, we have so much more room around it that kind of needs to get canceled out. So I'm just going to have to tweak those spheres here to kind of, you can see it's canceling out the vectors in those positions that are, more or less inside of this sphere, but it is still missing some of those. And I guess I should have been looking at that part of it. But anyways, we can play around with this and cancel these out for the most part. So let's just extend this a bit. It's going to kill those. Let's extend this back here. Should kill those. We can go this way a little bit more. Like that. And then let's just expand this a little bit here. We could probably just scale that up uniformly. That'll kill most of that. And then those vectors are really just kind of around his face now. So that's good. Let's look at this again. Let me untemplate this. If you're new to Houdini, the little pink arrow here is your template. I think actually, now that I'm thinking of it, I don't know if I've ever noticed that that's a little T-square. That's cool. So, you just get used to these things and never really think about them. But yeah, it's a T-square. That's clever. But that will actually allow you to see these kind of ghosted versions of your geometry. And if you hit D in your viewport, you can set the different settings for your template model geometry and things like that. So you can do that in there by hitting D and going in and setting your display options. And you can hold down Shift and template multiple things at the same time, although that can get a little crazy. You don't want to do that just with everything, but right there you can actually see the active, the activated voxels there of our vector grid. So I can see that by selecting this node when it's highlighting it like that. So those are our vectors that we've got. Now we just have them around the head, and let's go back to the Pyro solver and see what happens. So what we should be looking for here is having the backside of him being quite a bit looser. I double click to dive into that again. But we should be seeing the backside of that being more unencumbered. So let's do 20 there. Simulate it and see what happens. And yes, it is not working. And I know, fortunately, this time I know exactly why it's not working. So this is a funny little trick, little gotcha that you can find with VDBs or in general, because while I set those all those attributes there to 0, they don't have any any velocity basically that's in them anymore. They are still active. And you can see here by clicking on it, those are all still active voxels. So what it's actively trying to do then with those active voxels is it's trying to basically pull the values to 0, which is sort of the same thing that it was doing before. It's a very slight difference, I guess, but it's close enough that it basically works to do the same thing and not let those values escape, basically. And so what I need to do is deactivate those. And so the way that I did that was by putting in a very appropriately named VDB activate node. So let's drop this in here. And so what this will actually do is I can go in here and find deactivate, and I can deactivate the voxels that are that I don't want to be in that affecting my simulation at all. And so then when I do this, it should be the same. You should still see those voxels. Yep. I might want to, expand this some more. It's hard to say exactly. I did this slightly differently than I did the other one, but let's go back, simulate that again. And now we'll see that the backside of him is going to be way more active and kind of puffy. And his head should stay quite a bit more locked in. Now the back around his neck is not going to be, but up in the face kind of area right here should stay pretty well, locked in to those, those velocities that we had. And the backside of him should stay pretty loose. So you can see here we're getting quite a bit more wisps off the back of him. But on the front, we're keeping those all, pretty contained. So that was how I went through and did all of that, kind of stuff that you saw there before. Obviously there's a lot that you can art direct with this. It's not just like, hey, this is the only thing you can do here. You could, you can play around with this. You can move around those mask volumes and things like that and get a different look from it. But yeah, so that's pretty much where I got to so far in this. So what I'm going to do next is try to advect some particles. Advect, said that weird. Advect some particles through this and start to get that kind of snow look flowing around it. So that'll be the next thing I'm going to do. But first, I just want to get a nice warm beverage and kind of chill for a second. So I'm going to take a quick break probably be about maybe about 10 minutes. That's what my timer is set to. So I will just do that to get myself a cup of coffee and come back. And yeah, so if you have any questions or any thoughts or anything like that, just want to, throw something in the chat. Happy to hear from you guys, and glad to have some of you joining us tonight. So yeah, do a quick coffee break, and we'll be back shortly. All right. Hello, everybody. Got myself a nice warm beverage here. Ready to keep going a little here. It's not a caffeinated beverage. It's a little too late for that. I do go with the decaf at this time of night. But nonetheless, it's nice to have a nice warm cup of coffee, especially when as we said earlier, that was my car yesterday. So, anyways, so if this is your first time here, or you want to let me know just like where you guys are at, please drop in the chat if you're like, hey, I'm a beginner, or this is like new to Houdini, or this is something you've been doing for a long time. Drop that in the chat. Let me know kind of where you guys are at. If you guys have any suggestions for future projects or anything like that, I'd be happy to take them. Looking always going to be, streaming something, but, if you guys have any suggestions for, for different projects or things like that for me to try to tackle, that would be awesome. So, not always going to have something probably pre-set up like this. Sometimes it might just be, flying by the seat of my pants and trying to figure stuff out and, troubleshoot. And hopefully that's something you can learn from as well. And we can kind of all learn together that way. So, anyway, so I'm getting to the point right now where I'm not going to have anything pre-made for this. So I just want to keep playing a little bit. So I have my Pyro solver node here that I want to get some attributes or some volumes out of, basically. So what I'm going to do here is adjust my export settings. I don't need the temperature field because there's not going to be any temperature. And I don't need the CD, which is the color, because I don't need the color. I'm going to convert this to a VDB so that it does automatically kind of, you can see what it did right there. It took this extra space basically that's in the around the simulation and just kind of trimmed it out when I hit convert to VDB, because at this point there are no attributes in that. So as this moves, you'll see that box will change and move around a little bit. But if we have this off, it's quite a bit larger. We got 16 million voxels there. And this way we have 1.8 million active voxels, and it's going to, tumble and play back quite a bit nicer than if you've got, 14 million. So again, I've got an okay GPU in my computer, so it's not a big deal to tumble around with that. In fact, I'm not even sure at which level that'll get kind of, dicey for you to be tumbling around with how many voxels, but it can be a nice little saving right there. If you can get away with using VDBs, which most of the time I don't see why you wouldn't be able to. The other thing you can do as well is resample volumes and things like that. So if you wanted to just get like a lower resolution velocity field out of here and things like that, you can resample or cull. So like cull just basically is saying like, hey, trim out velocity values that aren't, over a certain value. Resample, just change the voxel scale up, multiply it by 2. If you look here, the velocity field there, if you go to the end of it, it says voxel size 0.04 versus 0.02. So it's doubled, the resolution of that field. So there's some nice things that they've built into here to take care of some of things. But I'm just going to keep the field the way it is. I don't want to mess with anything because I want to get some advected attribute or values from this. So I'm going to put down a null, and I'm going to say, I'll just call this snow sim out. Yep. Typing's going great. And I like to color my output nodes green. Again, learned that somewhere and just have kind of stuck with it. Great. So I've got my snow simulation out right here. It's outputting the density and velocity and a bunch of other detail attributes and things like that. Great. So if I do another node, another geometry node, didn't do a geometry node, and I'll call this one sim snow particles. So put that to the purple color, and I'm going to do an object merge here. I could do this all in the same network, I guess, too, but I'm just thinking to split it out might be nice, so that if, I don't have these huge node trees that I have to kind of go through and diagnose, what, a month from now, if I, need to come back to this, I don't have to like, dive through a whole tree or whatever of things. The reason I capitalized that null is because it puts it right up to the top here, so that makes it easier to find. So there's my snow sim out. Just making sure that it's coming. There's no like transformation that's going to, mess this up or anything like that. So if I, moved my object around or anything like that, it's still going to transform, from world space into this object space. So I'll just call this in snow VDBs. I always color these red if they're input nodes. And so those are going to drive, that's going to be my velocity field and things like that are going to help drive my particle sim. But obviously I need my particles to come from somewhere too. So let's grab this guy as well and just let's put a null up here so I can grab this easily. So let's call in SimGeo. I could also kind of break this out into its own, geometry node if I wanted to, but actually it's not even really in, it's just SimGeo. So a lot of times I'll color things yellow if they're in the middle of a network somewhere, just so I, at a glance can like zoom out and be like, oh yeah, there's a random yellow node right there. That's probably getting referenced somewhere else, or, it's kind of for things that I know is going to get pulled out and cross-referenced in other places. So I'll just duplicate this since it's basically in the same spot right there. Great. So there's my snow VDB, or sorry, in SimGeo. Just reading the node name and it's not right. So there's the in SimGeo right there. And so the other thing that I could possibly do, I guess I'm just kind of working through this whole process, is I could also take the SDF that I'd created before and actually erode that away so that I have like these particles coming from like inside of the geometry somewhere. And now that I'm thinking about it, that even might be a better option as well. So let me go back up here. And at this point, just call this SimGeo SDF. So I can reference this out right here because this is my SDF that I created. So instead, I'm going to bring that in. I'm also going to hide these other objects just so I don't have all this ghosted geometry and stuff going on here, so I can just kind of focus on this alone. SimGeo SDF. All right, great. So then if I go to if I just type in SDF, I can grab this reshape node right here. And there's a couple different modes here that you can do. You can do dilate or erode. And you can do this in grid units, like, voxel units, or you can set this world space. And that's going to try to erode it by, I believe, an entire meter, which it looks like it is. Oh, that looks so bizarre. A skinny pool toy. So this, and when this is in world space units, you can see that it's obviously shrinking it down by that amount. So if we wanted it just to be a real little bit, we could do it like that. We can kind of dial this in based on, how exactly we want this, how much we want to be gone from here. Now, unfortunately, with this specific model, if I erode too far, obviously these little like horns on his head go away. If I go down to this, his ears start to get eroded away. So I don't know, maybe we'll start. Actually, let me ghost that for 1 second. See kind of the difference. Yeah, it looks so funny. That's his skeleton inside. We never knew that's what his skeleton looked like. Yeah, that's probably good because I don't want the snow to be coming right from like the surface. I don't want it to be like popping in right at the surface. I want it to kind of come from inside of it. Um, so let's try that. Um, yeah, yeah, that should be good. All right, I'm gonna hide that. Let me actually see. I don't remember how the scatter works exactly with an SDF. I've done it with density before. Yeah, no, that's just gonna go in the whole activated like field basically. So, um, I guess what I'll do real quick, since this is such a low voxel count, yeah, it's not super high voxel. So, I'm gonna do a VDB convert. Just quickly convert it back to some geometry that I could use with a scatter node. Again, if any of you have a thought as like, oh yeah, you could actually do it this way quicker, by all means, please let me know. I'd love to know if there's a quicker way to do that. But there we go. There's just some quick, simple geometry. You can kind of triangulate it a little bit. It really doesn't really matter at all. But yeah, if there's a quicker way to do this step or just like this, not having to convert it back into geometry, because I could see times where that would be, could be a really costly, calculation to do. I'm just not sure if there's a scatter that would respect the SDF. Yeah. Anyways, this works. So this is, just call this erode SDF. And then this is create geo. Cool. So now we can scatter on that. No problem. No, that'll work. That's how it's made to work. There's our points. Now, what we could actually do is, instead of scattering, because we're going to be basically scattering it anyways, we could just do a pop network here. And that's going to scatter it on the surface anyways. So there's our pop network running, doing its thing. Now this should calculate super fast. I think if I turn this little calculation thing off here, run this again, pretty sure that just flies. Yeah, it's basically instantaneously calculated. Pop simulations are thankfully very quick to calculate. So it doesn't take a lot to add these, doesn't take a huge, oh, hey, Crossfader, thanks for the follow. Appreciate that. There's, so it doesn't take a huge calculation in this case to add particles that are going to get advected around and stuff. I keep saying that's so weird. Advected? That's a weird word. Anyways, so this pop network, if you haven't seen it before, makes a dynamics network inside of it, a DOP network, and builds just a really simple pop setup. I mean, this is pretty much what all pop setups are, or pretty similar to what most pop setups are, so I don't really know, why you would build this from scratch in most cases. I'm sure there's a lot of edge cases where you would build this from scratch, but it's a nice quick way to be able to just get a pop simulation like this. You get your DOP network node, and it starts just basically putting your particles right in that way. So yeah, so we need to add some different forces in here first of all. So why don't we go ahead and do that? So that's what this snow VDB is going to be helpful for. We're going to wire this in here, and could probably take out just the velocity here. So could actually use this little group line to just pull the velocity in, just in case, so that it doesn't get confused with what VDB we're doing or whatever here. So I believe there's an advect, pop advect by volumes. So we can add that in here. So now kind of the trick here is that, as far as I understand, if you put this in line like this, it'll take all of the particles that are sourced in here and calculate them through all the time. Now you can Cool. Thanks, Crossfader. Glad to have you here. Yeah, this is hopefully a good place to learn that. I've been doing this for about 5 years now, so I'm kind of a little new to the whole thing as well. I mean, 5 years is a while, but I know there's people that have been doing this for quite some time. So yeah, glad to have you with me. And yeah, if you have any questions, please drop them in chat. Happy to have folks here. So anyway, so this I believe that the the way that I've understood this is that this will actually calculate those unless you obviously distinctly say don't use this specific group. Whereas this could pull in, this will be calculated after this chain, that this will calculate left to right, top to bottom, I believe is how it gets calculated. I could be off on that. Please don't quote me on it, but I know that you can kind of wire these differently, and you'll get slightly different results depending on how you have them wired in there. But anyways, they give you the nice little wire pops into here, so that's what we're gonna do. So we're gonna be taking a velocity source here for this pop advect by volumes, and I don't want to use the velocity source this way. I want to do the second context geometry, and that's just going to take this geometry right here, input 2, and use that as our velocity. So taking in the field name vel, that's exactly what I want to do. Yeah, exactly. You can do that in the merge itself. Yes, right here, left to right. Yep, exactly. There's also DOPS is a little different because you can have mutual relationships, which are a little bit different, and you can do some some weird feedback kind of loop things going on in DOPS, but that can get real dicey real quick. But yeah, no, I think you're exactly right, Crossfader. The merges are supposed to be left to right. So yeah, exactly. And yeah, so this pop advect by volumes is going to help us push these around. And so we can take a look at this now and see. I'm actually just going to hide my guide here. I don't want to see that obnoxious geometry there. Yep, and there we go. Starting to get blown around a little bit, advecting our points around, and let's see here. We can look at this. Oops. We want to see this whole thing together. I'll just put the visibility down there. We can kind of see what's going on here. Yep. So that's the unfortunate thing here is that since we don't have that the velocity field to be pulling those that we had created before to pull these back in, it isn't actually taking that extra step. So that's why they're just kind of going off into infinity, because if they get to the edge of the advection field that's happening there that we're bringing in these particles right here, if it gets to the edge of this VDB, it's actually just going to kind of keep just traveling infinitely out. So what we really could do there is add in the other velocity field that we had created before, and do it that way as well. So and then we could blend that in as well. So let's do that. So let's go back to this snow effect here, and if you remember when we calculated this gradient field here, and if I change this visualizer back to surface gradient, there's all of our nice calculated velocity vectors that we had made here. Now this is obviously the surface gradient. It's just it's the surface gradient vectors, and we end up renaming it down there. But there are all of those vectors right there. So so we could pull those in and start using those to help push those particles back so that they're not kind of just flying around like that. So let's do that. Let's pull those in as well. Let's do a null here, and I'll just call this geo surface gradient. All right. So then what I'll do is have that come in. I could probably have that come in the same. Yeah, I don't see why not. Could have it come in that same spot right there. So I'll do another merge here and just pull in that same SimGeo right there. Just call that surface gradient. So now I should have that surface gradient as well, along with the velocity. That all looks good. Cool. And then what I'll do in here is just add one more of those just to advect it a little bit more. And what I'm going to end up doing is turning these down a little bit so that they're not like perfectly like holding, you know, the geometry in and stuff, or the particles in. But let's just, for now, we can just rename this to be surface gradient. Yep. So this field will be called surface gradient. Cool. Let's see how that goes. And just gonna let this all sim real quick. Take a quick coffee break. Yeah, this is the pyro solver going in the background here. And then actually it's probably doing this as well. So I guess we'll get the whole thing all at once. But now at least the pyro solver is completely calculated. So, interesting. It's kind of doing the opposite of what I was hoping it would do. Well, it's slowing it down. That's for sure. That is for sure. Let me think. Well, yeah, it might just be that it's not. Let me see if I do this. Let me just see if I crank the the velocity on it. Let me just make sure that this is all simmed as well. Yep, it is. Cool. So now I don't have to recalculate this all the time. That's just saved in cache. I could, in fact, write that out to disk if I wanted to, but I'm just not right now. So, it seems to me that's playing back too fast. Double check that. Let's see what's happening here. Yeah, I could pop drag. Yeah, I could do it as yeah, exactly. So a pop drag is a cool node. So what that would do is actually, if you have like a set velocity that you wanted it to go to, so like if I dropped that in there, that would slow it down. You know, that would basically take this same field and start to bring all those particles that get outside of that advected zone and start pulling their velocity down to zero. Yeah, that's exactly what it would do. So like in this case here, it's, you know, going to add that drag in it and everything. It's going to slow down the forces that are acting on it. But they're just going to kind of keep drifting away still until they come to a complete stop. So that sort of does help a little bit, you know, with the whole thing. I think, I think what I want to do is, I feel like this is actually, for some reason, this is like backwards. And I'm not sure if that's an inherent thing with the yeah, look at that. Looks like it was just backwards. That's so wild. And I truly don't understand why that is. So just to give you an idea of what I just figured, what I just did there. So I just inverted the scale of the pop advect by volumes, and that is making it so this surface gradient that was calculated over here with these vectors, it's inverted basically. It's taking that and inverting it, multiplying it by 1, so it's just putting the vector in the other direction. And I'm not sure why in this scenario here with these velocities in the pyro solver, why that would be different than the ones in the, like why that would be acting differently than the ones in the pop solver. It's really strange to me. I'm not 100% sure about that, but hey, it's working, so I'm not gonna argue with it. So so yeah, so what we've got going on here now is we've got the advect. So I'm just going to rename these so I can see. This is sim advect. This is gradient advect. So now I should be able to dial this up and down, and actually, depending on how far I want this to, how close I want to hold those particles to this geometry, I can, turn this down. So if I do this 0.1, it'll probably go quite a bit further away before it starts to come back in, or starts to collapse back in on itself. Might be a little too little. The other problem too is that if it goes past where that gradient field is, where those gradient vectors are, it's not going to be continuing that anymore. So, see, I'm going to turn this just a little bit back up just to kind of get a little more drag in there. And then let's see where this goes. -1. Yeah, this is starting to do what I'm hoping it'll do. So let's take a look at exactly kind of what this is looking like with the volume as well. So if I jump back up to here and look at my snow effect with it as well, there you can see I've got, some snow particles that are getting kind of, pushed around inside of this, and are then coming, kind of collapsing back in. They're never really traveling away from it. And in fact, what I would probably want to do with this as well is have there be some, random life to these different particles so that they're not just living forever. That'll probably look a little weird for them to just constantly be there. So we can tweak that in a second here. But the other thing in here that would be something to play around with as well as this advection type, because there's these 3 different types here. So a force is basically going to be trying to just push on these particles as they're moving around and hey, move back this direction. You can see that happening, in this example right here. You can see that these particles they're coming out, and they're not completely following this entire simulation here. They're pretty closely following it, but they're not being driven perfectly by it. I mean, there's some that are floating way out here and things like that. So it's loosely based on the same principle. But if you come inside of here and we do something like update velocity, I believe that's going to be more no, that's actually going to be pushing it a lot harder. Maybe it's the position one that'll keep it more closely tied to it. Yeah, I think that one, if I added this in update position as well, yeah, that's way more tightly driven by the actual vector field. So that's taking the position of those particles and updating it each. You can see it freaked out because I changed in the middle. But so this should be way more tightly drawn back into these velocity fields and stuff like that. So it's causing some really weird artifacting and stuff like that to happen there. So unfortunately, that's that's going to be a little bit too unnatural in this case. So I think probably our best thing is going to be the update force. If I have these both selected, you can see here I've got the two nodes selected. Let's just try them both on velocity just to see kind of where that gets us. Yeah, see that's pretty tight as well. Actually, that's even tighter than update position. You can actually use this blend here to kind of push it away a little bit, but it's too unnatural looking for something like snow. That just doesn't feel right. So we'll do the update force, and we can also play with this air resistance here. And the higher that is, the more closely it's going to match those velocity fields. The lower it is, the more it's just going to kind of drift away and do its own thing. So I kind of like where it's starting to get at right now. There are some pockets obviously where this is kind of gathering. So we, might want to take this one and turn the air resistance, down a little bit. And then maybe even this one, the air resistance is, maybe it goes up. I don't know, just to keep it a little more contained. There's all sorts of stuff we could do here. And you can see that that's going to obviously keep the shape of this a bit more. That is just a fun looking effect, I think. Pretty cool. So maybe this even goes down too. I don't know. Let's see. Whenever this bar turns yellow down there, that is that would indicate that your sim is not up to date. Basically, this cache isn't up to date. So when you go back to the beginning, it's going to resim that. So yeah, so that's kind of interesting. It's doing some interesting stuff. Let's look at that with the smoke with the snow, quote unquote, as well. So the only thing with this too is as you turn that air resistance down, it's also not going to impart as much velocity into it. So it sort of feels a little actually unnatural how slow it's moving in this case. So I had to catch up there for a second. So I will set this air resistance back. Control middle click will reset back to the defaults. Yeah. Just kind of evaluating where we're at here. Yeah, if you guys have any questions or comments or anything like that, please always know you can just drop them in chat, and I'd love to talk about anything like this that we're working through. If you guys have any ideas for more videos or things like that, that's always I'd always love to hear those as well. This happens to be something I'm working on at my studio right now with a couple other guys. So just trying to just working on something that will be helpful to me in my day-to-day life. But if you guys have anything that you're interested in seeing, please drop it in chat. Hit me up on Twitter, Houdini Hangout. Yeah, my name's Peter. My handle's Peter Cubic on Twitter. If you're interested in a follow, that would be cool. I don't tweet that much. I usually get it for more for news and things like that, but I've been definitely trying to be a little bit more active on there recently. So yeah, please do go back and take a look at it. Really the start of this was all was really just some simple display turbulence in the pyro solver node, and just a little bit of breakup, a little bit of noise put into a volume velocity, and then we used the gradient fields that you're seeing there to kind of pull it back in and keep it contained. So yeah, there's some really cool stuff you can do with this. It's also was a way that they were if you look at back up in the chat, there's tutorials by Intagma. Their tutorials are amazing. There's our amazing math and different stuff that they've done in there is great, but super accessible as well. So please check their stuff out. But they actually talk about using gradients to do some other effects as well. I actually think they used it for maybe even a particle sim, if I'm not mistaken, doing like holding particles to a surface. So it's pretty cool stuff. So Foundation series. Yeah. Cool. All right. I'll have to check that out. Yeah. So this is definitely starting to get to be somewhere where I'm liking this simulation here. I think it's getting to be kind of fun. I'm gonna put some life in here because some random life parameters in here because obviously this is getting a little crazy. Want to bring that back a little bit. So let's go into this pop network here, and I'm gonna go to the source birth attributes. So life expectancy is 100. Let's see, this is 10 seconds. So let's do 2. Maybe 1. See how that gets. Let's see where that gets us. Cool. Thanks for the link, man. Yeah, there we go. We're getting some nice breakup in there of that, so it's not just going to be particles hanging out forever. That's starting to feel a little bit nicer. And again, we could, if we want to pull those particles in, more closely tied into the to that shape, we can go into our pop network here, turn up this gradient advection, maybe turn it back up to 1. And that's going to keep it all pretty close to that character. And so what I'm doing this simulation for is a character effect. And so the idea is to be able to define some of these character features maybe. So in this case, these particles would actually help to even maybe sort of define that where that character's head is and face and different things like that. It's supposed to be an abstract character, but we want to be able to custom define where some of these different features are and things like that. We might even add some color into it eventually and things like that to just help drive home the character of it. But yeah, that's starting to get pretty cool. I'm liking where that's going. And just as an example, I'm going to go back to this snow effect here and go into this and just cut this real quick because this is driving actually some of that extra kind of noise that's happening there in the background. And if we watch this now, it should be a lot more contained to the actual shape of the geometry. Yep. Cool. So I'm now curious to see what that looks like with these particle effects here. So let's take a look at how this gets driven now. So this will take a little longer because I have to sim both of them at the same time in order to get this. It actually has to do the volume sim and then this because they're both kind of, working off of each other. Yeah, but obviously this is going to hold that in quite a bit more closely. Yeah, that's cool. That's doing some neat stuff too. So if you were just joining us, I actually built some geometry to define the different areas with which this noise like kind of breakup is happening here, and I actually turned it off in these areas here back on the back side of this model so that the back end of it would get some more noise. But it's, this is an art directable thing. So obviously we can adjust those, and this is all just kind of programmer art anyways. It's not anything that is actually a real character or anything like that. We have a character animator at work who's going to actually make some real animated characters and stuff like that for me to play with. So this is just kind of testing out the effect and seeing where it lands. So that's how I'm actually turning off that noise. Basically the part back here that's pulling that volume back in. So that's why this is all way more contained now, because I'm turning off that masked area there to add the noise basically in. So yeah, this is I'm liking this. This is working pretty well. And obviously when you go into these particles here and into these Advect nodes, you can do some different stuff here. You can treat these as in the force, you can treat it as wind or not as wind. I'm trying to think that. I'm just going to read this real quick. Treat as wind to be matched by the particle. Okay, so I guess the treating it as wind is avoiding more overshoot on it, I guess is what they're saying. Yeah. Anyways, read the documentation always. It's always very good in side effects stuff. I mean, heck, the hover notes are better than some entire documentation for other software. So yeah, side effects. Also, just a quick shout out to the team over there. If you guys are ever looking for, if you have a paid version of Houdini, or an indie version or whatever, and you need customer support from them or technical support, reach out to them. They are absolutely the fastest technical support in the world. It blows me, and the guys at work put out bets to see how quickly they'll respond. It's ridiculous. It's the most insane thing ever. I'm just some guy that works at a small studio in Western New York, and they get back to me in like 2 hours. It's not like I'm like Disney or anything like that, or Pixar. So it's crazy. They're awesome, super helpful, and yeah, I've can't say enough good stuff about them. So huge props to them. Yeah. So if you're doing anything like this, you can always tweak these as well. You can get some more accuracy in your advection by changing these advection methods here. I believe that also incurs a hit on calculation times. Like if you do like trace or trace midpoint, that's going to incur a hit, because I believe what it's doing is it's actually looking at how the velocity is going over a certain number of frames, or whatever, something to that effect. But it's definitely more of a calculation hit. Now in this case, I mean, these are not that many how many particles do I have here? If I middle click here, it'll tell me I have 10,000 particles. I mean, this is basically nothing. But yeah, so there's like no, I'm not getting any calculation losses here. So I could up the resolution of that. Heck, I could go way crazier with my with my sourcing here and change the birth rate up to 10, double it, and easily get more or less the same, calculation speed. So I don't want to get too many particles in there, because too many particles obviously aren't gonna look like snow. Yeah, it's gonna just feel a little bit too crazy. But yeah, this is really starting to kind of do something interesting here. Getting some nice movement from it. Yeah, definitely. It's interesting too, because it kind of helps build kind of this structure for the actual character itself. You can see the structure of it from sort of where these particles are going. So it makes kind of for a neat way to kind of kind of define different parts of it as well. So I'm going to turn this thing back on just to kind of see where we end up with this whole thing. But that should only have to, oh no, it is going to have to recalculate that. So yeah. So I'm getting pretty close to being finished with my stream for the evening, I think. I mean, that's more or less the stuff that I wanted to get accomplished. It was actually, it's kind of funny. Sometimes in Houdini, you think something's going to take you, 30, 40 minutes to figure out, or a couple hours to figure out, and you just get it right off the bat, more or less. Other things, not so simple. But yeah, this is I think this is a fun little experiment for me, and I think there's definitely going to be some considerations if you were putting this in, like, say, a moving character, something that was fully animated and everything. I think the noise patterns would be a consideration you'd have to think about, because you'd want those to be moving with your character and not, have the character moving through them. A lot of times I feel like those noise patterns and things like that are calculated in world space. And so you would need them to be in a local space. But if the character's moving and rotating or doing things like that, that could be a little tricky. So I was actually playing around with that a little bit before, and just figuring out how to do that in kind of a previous project that I was working on. And it was fine. It was working. It was starting to work, but it makes more sense to just do this as a stationary effect for right now, and then kind of play with it from there. Add the layers of complexity. And I find that something that, like, as I'm tackling problems in Houdini, is like, you don't want to throw all the variables in at once, because then it's like, I've got 80 million things I've got to figure out all at the same time. And, that can be a little bit much to try to, pull, oh, I've got this could be causing an issue, this that could be causing an issue, this that could be causing an issue, all these things at the same time. That's part of why, I got the smoke sim done first, and then went on to the particles, because I knew once I had the smoke sim down and had all those velocities and things like that were driving it, I could then use that in my particle simulation and not really have to go back and touch the smoke sim at all. It's just going to be doing the same thing. So it's kind of like taking it one step at a time, breaking it up, not trying to do like all your simulations in the same, dynamics network. I mean, you could do that technically, but then you've got to have forces that are being taken from one simulation and making sure that they're being, like we were talking about before about merge nodes, and like having them mutually affect each other and all this stuff. It could be really just a mess to try to make sure that all your things are working properly together there. So sometimes it's just about kind of going one at a time through your, through your different, problem solving stages, instead of having to like have like all your variables thrown in at once. So that's even sort of why I'll break out these simulations and things like that into their own nodes, just so you can kind of isolate them from each other a little bit. And I know that, like, hey, if I'm working on this snow effect, it should probably propagate into this particle effect, no problem. Like, I have this stuff working now, so like more or less that should just, if I make a little tweak to my snow sim, it's not going to really break anything in my particle sim. So some of those things are just, things that I've kind of figured over the years, and everybody has different ways of attacking things. So yeah, but I think that's where I'm going to actually end the stream for tonight. If you guys again have any suggestions in the future for for different, video ideas, stream ideas, whatever, let me know. On Twitter is where I'm usually most active, Houdini Hangout over there. My handle's Peter Cubic if you want to just direct message me that way. But yeah, I'm really glad that you guys showed up today. Huge thanks to Side Effects for kind of cross streaming this on Twitch. I really appreciate that a lot. And hopefully everybody can get something out of this. I think it's a fun little project that I'm kind of working towards an end goal. I might come back and revisit it in the future, as I, maybe add more parts to the effect or whatever. But yeah, thanks everybody for joining me tonight. I really appreciated hearing from you guys. And yeah, hopefully I'll see you guys next week, 8 p.m. I'll be streaming again, Twitch and YouTube. So thanks to everybody. Really appreciate you coming out. My name is Peter. Thanks. See you soon.